Welcome to Coaching with Confidence and Care podcast, inspired by common topics that arise in coach training, mentoring, and supervision. I am Dr. Luba Desamidze, the founder of Upthink Coaching. I'm an active coach trainer, mentor, and supervisor. If you are listening, you're probably looking to deepen your skills as a coach. I hope this podcast will be a helpful resource for you and contributes to your journey. This episode has been on my mind for months, and I think it's going to be a really beneficial one because I want to talk about three-party engagements, that is, sponsored engagements. This is a huge topic, and I want to break it down into several episodes perhaps. In this first episode, I will talk about three-party agreements. This will come in handy if you are a coach who works or wants to work with organizations, especially if you do not have a lot of experience working as an external coach. Maybe after listening to this episode, you'll have more questions than answers, and that is okay. Feel free to send those questions to me so that I can shape the following episodes on this topic and include your questions. So, what is a three-party agreement? It is initially a conversation. I strongly recommend to facilitate it as a conversation first, and only then put all the agreements in writing as a recap of what's been discussed and send to all the stakeholders involved. Such an agreement is called a three-party agreement because it's common to have a sponsor, a representative of the organization, either an HR or a general manager who hires you as a coach to deliver coaching to some of their employees. Then there's a client or clients, the people you'll be coaching, and then there's you. My best practice is having a 3 or 4 party call with myself, the coachee, and the sponsor. It can be a HR or a GM or both. Sometimes also the client's line manager. The purpose is to have a transparent conversation about the interest of the organization that offers the benefit of coaching to their employee and the interest of the employee, so that we could find areas of alignment and proceed to delivering coaching. It is a complex context because you need to discuss the interests of all the parties, keep them in mind throughout the whole engagement, and communicate with each party ethically. If an organization is hiring a coach for an employee, the organization is interested in that employee's development and professional growth. The organization or the person's line manager usually has specific expectations and a general vision of how the employee could be more successful in their role, including what skills need to be reinforced or developed. Such a conversation is an opportunity for the sponsor to communicate clearly to both you and the employee what they expect. It is also an opportunity for the client to reflect on their professional and personal development, contribute to the conversation, and align with their organization. Alignment is a crucial step in three-party engagements because success is shaped together, and the vision of success is shaped together. Everyone must be on the same page about what needs to be achieved, what the desirable outcomes are, and how they will be measured. By having this conversation, you avoid assumptions and ensure that all outcomes are measurable, realistic, within the given time frame. Now, what does a three-party agreement need to include to ensure purpose and alignment? In writing, it should cover the overall purpose of coaching and shared high-level outcomes, which can be both business and leadership behaviors. These outcomes must be measurable and specific so that everyone knows what they are aiming for. The agreement should also include roles and responsibilities, what is confidential versus what may be shared, cadence and format of sessions, cadence and format of sponsor check-ins, data handling, recording policy, evaluation approach, that is, what will be measured, how and how often, and who the results will be available to, as well as process logistics such as contract duration, session length, and cancellation policies. It is also important to discuss an escalation path for ethical issues should they arise. Research consistently shows that clear multi-stakeholder contracting improves outcomes and enables evaluation without eroding trust. To balance organizational goals with the client's professional and personal development goals, You can co-create a Venn diagram of business results and leadership behaviors during or following the three-way meeting. The coachee then owns the session agenda while the process remains linked to shared outcomes. This ensures that development stays client-led while still aligned with organizational value. So let's see what items would it be important to cover in such conversations apart from the vision of success and measures of success. You definitely need to include the definition of coaching, what coaching is, what coaching isn't, and you need to explain it during the conversation as well. I like to start with bringing up trust and autonomy. In my experience, the best results always came from organizations that trusted their people to step up. They didn't hover or demand to know what was said in each session. They did not micromanage the process. Instead, they created space, offered support, and trusted employees to choose the conversations that mattered for their growth. The message was clear. Here's a resource for your development. Here's your coach. Use the resource wisely. No hand-holding, no babysitting, and oftentimes, the way managers engage with coaching became a real-time demonstration of their own leadership. You will also need to define the boundaries. Coach partners with a coachee to support their growth in alignment with the coachee's professional and personal objectives as well as organizational objectives. The manager, that is the client's line manager, supports your client's development, while HR may oversee the process, but not content. Roles and responsibilities need to be clearly defined. The coachee must be assured of confidentiality around the content of sessions. At the same time, HR has the right to get updates about the process, how it's going, whether your client is attending sessions, whether your client is following through on the action plan, whether they are taking coaching seriously, and the manager commits to supporting the employee. During the conversation, you can ask the line manager what support they're willing to provide and what's the best way for the client to communicate their needs. For example, if a manager wants the employee to show more initiative as a result of coaching, then it's the manager's responsibility to create the conditions for that initiative. Otherwise, how can the client step up if the climate does not allow it? When entering an organizational engagement, check for hidden agendas. If coaching is offered as a genuine investment into a person's development, great. But if it's framed as a performance management tool, that's a misuse of coaching. Reset the focus to development and growth. You don't want to be the coach brought in as the last resort before someone is fired. That sets the client up for failure from the start. If remediation is required, work with a coachee and manager to create a parallel plan owned by the manager or HR while continuing to coach around long-term development. Another thing that doesn't always get talked about enough is this. When you are working with modern organizations, you're not just working with a team, you're working with a team that's often culturally and contextually diverse, global, hybrid, cross-border. It means that your agreements have to reflect that. Different cultures think about hierarchy, feedback, and confidentiality in very different ways. If you ignore that, you'll find out the hard way. As you set up these calls, your real job is to protect psychological safety, create an atmosphere where clients, sponsors, and stakeholders feel safe to share openly. This is how your conversations can get more productive. Everyone will see the bigger picture and align on what success actually looks like. When a culturally diverse group can trust each other and row in the same direction, coaching really pays off. I actually have an episode on cultural sensitivity for coaches. You may find it really interesting. Another good practice is to discuss review points. Schedule at least one joint check-in with all parties to reassess goals and adapt to organizational challenges. This keeps the process relevant and reinforces a culture of open communication, especially if this is long-term engagement. Also include clear exit clauses. While we hope engagements end successfully, circumstances may change. Make sure it's clear that either party may terminate the engagement and specify what precedes and follows termination. After the conversation, it's common practice to document the three-party agreement to capture goals, confidentiality, roles, and reporting structure. This prevents future disputes. Establish feedback protocols upfront by agreeing on when and how sponsors will receive updates. For example, a midpoint review or a final report. Avoid pressure to disclose private content if assessments are involved. Discuss in advance whether reports will be available to the line manager and in what form. The coachee may consent to share a full report or prefer to provide only key points and personal reflections from the debrief. When we do three-party engagements, it's extremely important to bring up questions of ethics and divergence. When we have three-party engagements, it is important to discuss ethics, boundaries, and possible divergence. Explain the code of ethics that you adhere to. Coaching contracts and agreements usually explicitly state that the client sets session goals, the sponsor owns business priorities, and the coach protects process and ethics. It can get tricky when organizational and individual goals diverge. I know from experience, in the beginning, I had to use coaching supervision more than once to reach agreement with myself on what was ethical and beneficial in such situations. If you notice a real divergence, hit pause and bring the other parties back to the table. Reset the agreement if needed and make sure everyone is crystal clear on what coaching is and what it isn't. Explain that the coach does not carry messages. Exceptions to confidentiality include legal compulsion, risk of harm, or illegal activity as defined in their codes of ethics or employee contract. Another point I want to address in this episode is success criteria and evaluation. When we work with organizations, a big question always comes up around success criteria and evaluation. How do we define success in a way that satisfies all the parties? In my experience, success is often defined at two levels. The first is business outcomes, for example, stakeholder alignment on a specific initiative, reduced decision cycles, increased efficiency, improved team cohesion, greater ownership of results, or successful negotiations. The second level is behavioral indicators. When your client can demonstrate specific leadership behaviors in various circumstances, say navigating crisis or managing change. But actually, if we dive deeper, there's more to it. There's also cultural alignment and organizational climate. Coaching happens inside a system. Success includes seeing how a coachee's growth contributes to collaboration, innovation, and adaptability across the team or organization. Then there's stakeholder engagement. Are peers, managers, and direct reports noticing the change? Collecting that kind of feedback gives a much richer picture than just looking at individual outcomes. And yes, ROI matters. Organizations want to see tangible impact, improved productivity, better decision-making, successful projects, measurable outcomes that justify the investment. When you combine business results, behavioral change, cultural impact, stakeholder feedback, and ROI, you get the full story. That's when coaching stops being just helpful for the individual and becomes a strategic advantage for the whole organization. One thing I see all the time with senior leaders is that they love the big picture, strategy, vision, and all that. But when it trickles down to their teams, those grand ideas often sound vague and impossible to act on. Take a sponsor who says, I need them to show more maturity as leaders. Okay, but what does maturity actually look like? Or another favorite, We need people to be more innovative because the industry is moving fast. Great, but what does innovative mean in real terms? That's why these conversations matter so much. We have to translate broad aspirations into observable, specific behaviors. Otherwise, the leader thinks one thing, the employee hears another, and everyone walks away frustrated. A coachee might genuinely believe they're being innovative, while their line manager is thinking, not even close. Now, our goal as coaches is simple. Get clear, get specific, and turn strategic big words into behavioral benchmarks everyone can recognize. Now, what kind of metrics or outcomes can be tracked without breaching confidentiality, since we are not going to disclose the content of sessions? Usually, those are pre or post 360-degree surveys or stakeholder interviews. We can also use pulse checks that focus on target behaviors, sponsor observations of agreed indicators, and delivery of a client-owned development plan. Another key piece is helping your clients figure out how to communicate their progress to their managers. I once coached a brilliant leader who completely transformed her mindset and leadership style. She worked hard, trusted the process, and stretched herself far beyond her comfort zone. But she was so humble about it that her sponsor didn't notice all the change that was happening. From my perspective, the progress was night and day. And that's because I was with her in those sessions. But because she wasn't sharing it so fully, it flew under the radar. I see this a lot, especially with my Chinese and Asian clients in general. Humility is valued, so they tend to underplay their accomplishments. In a multicultural workplace, that humility can be misread as a lack of impact. Part of our job as coaches is to help them reframe this. It is not bragging, it's communicating results clearly and objectively. Think of it as putting the headlights on their progress they've already made. Otherwise, their manager is driving blind. Now that I mentioned communicating progress back to the organization, trust is everything. I always let my coachees preview any reports before they hit their manager's inbox. My go-to is a simple one-pager, what the original contract was, what expectations we set, what we agreed on, the areas they worked on, and the key shifts they've made. And here's the critical part. My coachees get first eyes on it. If there's anything they're not comfortable sharing, we revise. By co-creating the report, we make sure it's both fair and objective, and my client feels safe, knowing they have a voice in how their progress is presented. Only after that green light do I send it to the line manager and HR. That's how you preserve trust and keep the organization in the loop without throwing your client under the bus. Well, that's it for today. As I said, this is just a little dive in and some guidelines for coaches who are just starting out, or maybe you already have organizational engagements and you always look to enhance your practices on this. If you have any questions, send them my way. I can definitely create another episode diving into specifics of organizational engagements. If you found this episode helpful, I'd be truly grateful if you shared it with fellow coaches or anyone who could benefit from it. You are more than welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect, answer questions, or hear your thoughts. All the podcast topics were once conversations I had with someone, or maybe even more than once. That's what inspired the podcast. If you're interested in exploring accredited coach training programs, mentor coaching, or supervision, our next level 1 and level 2 cohorts launch this fall. Let's dive deeper into the real relational side of coaching together. All the details are on our website, so feel free to check it out, www.upthinkcoaching.com. Next time, we are going to explore one of the most powerful aspects of coaching, working with emotions. How do we help clients navigate what they are feeling, use it to gain clarity, and turn emotional awareness into real action? It's subtle, it's complex, and many coaches are hesitant to address emotions. However, it's essential for any coach who wants to go beyond surface level change. So join me for that conversation. I promise it will give you practical insights and new ways to support your clients at a deeper level. Talk soon.